still in the game. Somebody's pulling your chain. About 22nd century science. Hello, welcome to a 22nd Century Science. My name is Paul Westron. I'm the author of When Stars Collide and the book A 22nd Century Science, where we demonstrate that astrology is true after all. Today I want to look at lesbian and gay relationships, and I'll also add an ultra famous person in towards the end to highlight a contrast between what famous relationships are like and what lesbian and gay relationships are like. We have an inverse kind of property of the two. Fame gives you a lot of choice, but it reduces randomness. Lesbian and gay people have a far less choice, and that increases randomness. So we would assume that the synastry would be diverse, and that we would not necessarily encounter a massive amount of progressed synastry or a massive amount of natal synastry in those types of relationships. And in fact, that's not the case. However, one of the things we don't see in gay relationships too much is the natal Sun-Venus trine. So natal Sun and natal Venus in a trine aspect is very popular in relationships overall, far, far more popular than chance would predict. However, in gay relationships, I've only found one in my whole study. Now, I've only got about 45 gay relationships in this study, lesbian and gay relationships, in the study itself, and possibly 10 others that I've sourced since. However, again, that relationship aspect doesn't turn up in nearly the sort of frequency we would expect, but the progressed version of the aspect does. Now, here's the thing. We have a statistical problem if astrology is true. We have a statistical problem as far as gay people are concerned. And I'll explain that again. I explained it in episode 6. But essentially, if you have a smaller pool to choose from, you have less choice. Simple as that. And so, as far as famous people are concerned, they have more choice, but it's harder to meet people. It's harder to meet people randomly. Fame creates a problem for people who are ultra famous, because it's very difficult to meet someone who hasn't judged you already, who hasn't already developed a view of what you are like, and will probably behave in a different way towards you than they would if you were not famous already. So we have a problematic scenario as far as research is concerned there. But what we found is that another part of this is that having a lot of choice is also demonstrative, or would also demonstrate astrology better, because quite simply you're not limited by small pools. Small pools of choice might compromise the way that synastry works. So it might compromise who you're attracted to, or who you settle for, or how you want to describe it. I've been criticised for using famous people in this study before. I don't believe that the criticism was well founded, because quite simply, if you have choice, synastry is going to work for you just as well as if you don't have choice. But if you don't have choice, you're going to settle for something else. What I found particularly interesting is in the 19th century relationships, I would find that trines, some Venus trines, occur at the rate of chance, but squares occur half as often as trines. So what the situation we'd have there is that people avoid squares when they don't have the chance to choose a trine or a conjunction. They'll avoid the conflict that a square will bring, or the problems that a square will bring. There are also some other potential problems as far as generations are concerned and ages are concerned. My study was largely of people alive in the 20th century. There were plenty of people from the 19th century, some people from the 18th century in the first study, and before that even in the first study. I limited that in the second study to people born after 1800, and that was simply because the date changes in the 1700s meant that more research was required for pre-1761 dates. And I thought that would create an unnecessary overhead. So I limited in the second study people from 1800 onwards. I obviously wouldn't find as many relationships from the 1800s as I could from the 1900s. And a really great source of relationships is Hollywood. It's not the only source. I mean, there are philosophers, there are scientists, there are economists, there are footballers, there are sports people, there are royalty. There's all kinds of different celebrity in my relationship study. But Hollywood was really useful because there was a lot of public relationships there, and there was a lot of love affairs there as well, and they were recorded, and we got the time frames of them, and we could usually triangulate to the right time for many of these relationships by looking at the events that were surrounding those relationships. For example, Ava Gardner had a couple of affairs with bullfighters in the 1950s while she was married to Frank Sinatra. So we knew from where, say, Mario Cabré was at a particular time, that we could say that Ava Gardner was there at the same time. We knew that they were probably in the same vicinity of each other between these periods of time. Daryl Zanuck came to Europe in the 1950s and stayed because he could make pictures with fewer rules associated with them, so that's what he did. And so we know what Daryl Zanuck did during the 1950s and 60s because it's well documented. We can say we can be far less certain about people born in the 1700s because there are basically fewer people recording in diaries what people did. And it's slightly more difficult to triangulate. But as far as time is concerned, I just need years. I don't need the month or the day or the week when something happened. I just need the year that it happened because I'm looking at astrology at a particular level. So as far as these relationships that I want to show you today are concerned, I think that we're looking at a smaller pool as far as lesbian and gay relationships are concerned. And then I'm going to show you Taylor Swift and her relationships. And we're going to look at how progressed natal synastry worked in both of these cases. So we're looking at lesbian and gay relationships. Remember the double-decker bus that I talked about in episode 6, I think it was? It's got 80 people on it, including the driver, the conductor, and 78 passengers. And the equation, population divided by the number of degrees in a circle times the number of available degrees times the number of different planets involved. And that's 80 divided by 360 times 8.068 times 2. The 8.068 is the orb, which is 2 degrees and 1 minute of arc. The 360 are the degrees in a circle, 80 is the population of the bus, and 2 is Sun and Venus. So the expected number of any Sun and Venus aspect is 3.58 in every 80 people. So that means in every 100 people you meet, you will share a progress-to-progress Sun-Venus trine with 4.4 of them. But we're interested in 80, so that's 3.58, 3.56 if we do it via the control group. But 50% could be the wrong gender. If we say half will be out of your age range, that would be probably about right. And a third will be married or unavailable for some other reason. That leaves you with 0.3 of a person. You'll have to catch 3 buses to meet one person who shares a progress-to-progress Sun-Venus trine with you and who might be a match. Except if you are in a gender preference minority, if you're lesbian or gay, in which case you will have to catch at least 50 buses to get the same odds, probably more, because at least 90% and probably 96% will be the wrong gender. So what does that look like in real life? Here is Pete Buttigieg and Chasten Buttigieg. Now they've got an opposition between Mars and Venus, but the year that they met, they had a Venus-Sun opposition. Alex Hedison and Jodie Foster, they are the only same-sex couple that I've found with a natal Sun-Venus trine. Now that's the most popular aspect in straight relationships, but they're the only gay couple I've found with this. But the year that they met, they had a whole host of other things going on, including a progressed Venus natal Sun trine, a Venus opposition, and a Mars-Venus conjunction. And this is Sydney Bernard with Jodie Foster. And in this case, it's a progressed Sun, progressed Venus opposition, and a progressed Venus natal Mars trine in 1992. Portia de Rossi, Ellen DeGeneres. Now they have the progressed Sun-Venus conjunction, not the trine, the conjunction. And in 2005, they had a Venus-Mars conjunction as well. Previous relationship of Ellen was with Anne Hesh, and they have a Sun-Sun trine. But in 1997, Venus and the Sun were in a trine as well. And this is a straight relationship of Anne Hesh, and again we've got the natal Sun, natal Venus trine. This is Steve Martin, and nothing else really to speak of. Now these are the relationships of Lance Bass, Michael Turchin and Riken Lemkool. Nothing in the natals. A trine in 2012 for between Turchin and Bass, and a trine again and a conjunction between Lemkool and Bass in 2006. Now this is Billie Jean King and some of her relationships. Now this is her relationship with Larry King, not the journalist Larry King, the promoter Larry King, and the relationship with a lady called Marilyn McRae, which was her first lesbian relationship, and nothing in the progressions between Larry and Billie Jean, but a Venus-Venus trine between Marilyn and Billie Jean in 1971. And this is Billie Jean and Ilana Kloss. And there we have the progressions for 1986 include a Mars-Venus conjunction and 2 Sun-Venus trines. These are the relationships of Noel Coward, John Wilson and Graham Payne. We don't have anything in the natals, but here in the progressions we have a Sun-Venus trine for Wilson and a Venus-Venus opposition, and then we've got a trine and an opposition between Noel and Graham Payne. Jean Cocteau and Raymond Radiguet, nothing in the natals. Jean Cocteau and Jean Marais, nothing in the natals. And then in the progressions, Cocteau and Radiguet have 2 Sun-Venus conjunctions by progression in 1918, and Marais and Cocteau have a Venus-Mars conjunction in 1937. And this is Peter Pears, Benjamin Britten, nothing in the natals, and an opposition between the Sun and Venus in the progressions in 1936. And this is Gianni Versace and Antonio D'Amico, and this is a Venus-Mars opposition in 1983. Chester Coleman and W.H. Auden, 2 Sun-Venus conjunctions, and that's all that they had. They had natal connections. Don Bacardi and Christopher Isherwood, they had a Mars-Venus trine. But in 1952, they also had a progressed Venus natal Sun trine. Vita Sackville-West and Virginia Woolf, they had nothing in the natals, but they had a progressed Venus natal Sun trine in 1925. I believe that relationship lasted for 10 years. This is Romaine Brooks and Ida Rubenstein in 1911, and they had also Natalie Barney and Romaine Brooks. Nothing in the natals for Ida and Romaine. Natalie and Romaine have a trine between Venus and Venus. There we have an opposition between Venus and Mars in 1911 for Brooks and Rubenstein, and Barney and Brooks get a opposition in 1915. These are the relationships of Oscar Wilde. This is Lord Alfred Douglas and Oscar Wilde, nothing in the natals. Robbie Ross and Oscar Wilde. There's a Venus trine, natal Venus trine. Nothing for Douglas and Wilde. You might be able to see a 4-degree Venus-Sun trine by progression. Not usually very detectable. And the same with Ross and Wilde, nothing to see. But with his wife Constance, we have a progressed Sun, natal Venus trine, and a Venus-Venus trine in 1884. Susan Sontag Susan Sontag, famous writer and intellectual, with Annie Leibovitz, Nothing in the Natals. There we have progressed Sun, natal Venus trine, and natal Venus, progressed Venus conjunction in 1988. Sontag was married to Philip Reef in 1950, Nothing in the Natals, but there we have a progressed Venus, progressed Sun conjunction, which is significant. Westlife, this is Mark Feely and Kevin McDade, the photographer, Nothing in the Natals, bit of Venus trine in the progressions in 2005. Adrienne Monnier and Sylvia Beach, both publishers. They were together for 36 years, and when they met, Venus and Mars were in a trine. This is Marcel Proust and Ronaldo Hahn. Proust the novelist, Hahn the composer. They were together for 2 years, from 1894. Nothing in the Natals, but in the progressions, a Sun-Venus conjunction, but in 1894. This is Martina Navratilova and Rita Mae Brown. Nothing in the Natals, but a trine in the progressions in 1981. Fiona Shaw and Saffron Burrows, Nothing in the Natals, and a Venus-Mars trine in 2003. David Furnish and Elton John, Nothing in the Natals, but a trine between Venus and Mars in 1993. John Reed and Elton John, there's a Venus trine. And that's John Reed ended up being Elton John's manager. This is John Maynard Keynes, an economist, with Duncan Grant. Nothing in the Natals, but an opposition in 1908. And this is a heterosexual relationship that Keynes had with Lydia Lopakova. Nothing in the Natals. 2 trines in progressions the year that they met in 1918. Otto Rambo and Paul Verlaine. Nothing in the Natals, but the progressions revealed an opposition and another opposition. Their relationship lasted for 3 years. British comedian Frankie Howard and wine expert Dennis Hamer, Nothing in the Natals, but in 1958 when they met, an opposition and a trine. Melissa Etheridge, Julie Cypher, Nothing in the Natals, and in the progressions of Venus-Mars conjunction. And then with Etheridge and Michaels, we have opposition between the Sun and Venus in the Natals, and another opposition between Venus and Sun in the progressions. Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas met on September the 8th, 1907. They had a Venus-Mars conjunction, but they also had 2 trines. This is what they look like mapped. See how rare these little opportunities are, these windows open. And this was quite a relationship. Gertrude Stein and Alice Toklas were really lovers of each other's lives. Stephen Fry and Elliot Spencer, both comedians. Fry, also an anti-astrology intellectual. And here in 2013, Sun-Venus trine, Venus-Mars trine, Venus-Venus trine. Now the reason it's 2013 and they met in 2014 is because these planets were applying for a year. 2014 planets really apply for the year 2014 to 15. And this is what it looks like. The 2 aspects are in complete step. So the 2 aspects hit at the same time. So fame has the inverse effect on relating to that faced by lesbian and gay people. In theory, there's more choice, and in theory, there's less randomness as far as the meeting of people is concerned, because people have already made a judgment about you because you're famous. So the first relationship that Taylor Swift entered into in the public arena was that of Joe Jonas. There's nothing really in the natals apart from the suns are in trine aspect, and there's not much in the progressed planets either, apart from, again, the suns are in a progressed trine aspect, so they're in step with each other, which is going to give a certain level of compatibility associated with what these individuals want in life. It won't necessarily give a romantic aspect there. And this is Lucas Till, and they were together from March 2009 to April 2009. There's a Venus-Mars trine natally, and by progression there's a progressed Venus natal Sun trine. Brilliantly statistically significant aspect there. Taylor Lautner in autumn or fall 2009, nothing in the natals, but a progressed Venus, progressed Mars conjunction in 2009. John Mayer, together for 3 months, from 2009 to 2010. Nothing in the natals. The Venus, the natal Venus positions are actually close to a trine. but this is probably aspect to look at. This is progressed Venus, progressed Mars opposition, 2009. Now this was probably a very short relationship in January 2010. Corey Monteith, nothing in the natals, but a progressed Sun, progressed Venus trine, and a progressed Venus, progressed Mars trine in 2010. That's very compatible, but as a relationship didn't last very long, they probably didn't have a lot of time to explore that. Jake Gyllenhaal, this was in late 2010, and there's not too much going on in the natals. There's a sextile between Venus and Venus, and there's a wide conjunction between progressed Sun, progressed Venus. Probably not that intense in 2010, probably would have got a little bit more intense a couple of years later, but by then I think they called it a day. This is not a big deal. This is a meeting more than anything else, I think. A song was written, but this is progressed Venus, progressed Sun trine, which is great in relationships and is one of the most common aspects in relationships. But again, there's an opposition in the progressions between Venus and the Sun, which is also hugely significant. Eddie Redmayne and Taylor Swift, nothing in the natals. I'm not sure if this was a real relationship, but it's reported as such. So if there's anything going on, it's Venus just under 3 degrees away from progressed Venus, just under 3 degrees away from natal Venus. So that's applying, but in 2011, I don't think it was given a lot of chance. It's a chap called Cord Overstreet. They had one date in 2011. It was caught on camera, though. Nothing in the natals. A progressed Mars, natal Venus trine, and a square between progressed Venus and progressed Mars. Harry Styles and Taylor Swift, they have the progressed Venus, natal Venus, natal Mars conjunction in Aquarius, and it looks like the Venus position, progressed Venus, Taylor's progressed Venus position was just going out of orb when they got together, so they probably met a year and a half too late for this to work. Zac Efron and Taylor Swift, not sure if this was a real relationship, but there was a progressed Venus, progressed Mars conjunction in 2012. It was probably would have been more intense a year or so later. Connor Kennedy and Taylor Swift, natal Sun, natal Venus opposition, but there in the progressions we have a progressed Sun, natal Venus trine, and a progressed Venus trine in 2012. This relationship lasted for probably 4 months, 5 months. Calvin Harris, Taylor Swift. Now they've got that Sun-Venus conjunction, natal Sun, natal Venus conjunction, but they've got a natal Venus and natal Mars square. So their romantic compatibility is quite high, their physical compatibility is quite low. And that is reinforced by the position of Taylor Swift's Venus in Aquarius, which is in a square aspect to Calvin Harris's natal Mars. Tom Hiddleston, Taylor Swift, nothing in the natals, a wide conjunction for Venus and a quite close square between Venus and the Sun. Lots of things will have been getting in their way, so this will not have had a lot of chance. It took place between May and September 2016. Joe Alwyn, now that is a natal Venus, natal Mars trine, which seems to be quite popular for Taylor Swift. And that's the long and the short of that relationship, I think. Matty Healy, they were together for a couple of months in 2023, and that's a natal Sun, natal Venus trine again. And in the progressions we find a trine between Mars and Venus, and 2 trines between Venus and Venus. So they've got the progressed Venus trine, and then they've got a natal Venus, progressed Venus trine as well. It's all very positive. And again, we've got Venus and Mars aspect, this time a conjunction between Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. And here we're seeing some squares. Now, they are never brilliant outcomes for people. and in 2023 they were probably just out of orb. That progressed Venus, progressed Mars square in 2023 will be heightened by about 2025, to be exact, about 2025. That's not a great outcome usually for relationships, but we'll see. So what you're seeing, lesbian and gay people have smaller pools to choose from, and that if astrology is true, and it's looking more and more likely from my point of view that it is, that we can actually make a difference to their lives. How? Well, quite simply, you have to meet more people in order to get to the same levels of compatibility that straight people can get, because they have to meet fewer people. Straight people have to meet fewer people to get to the astrological compatibility. Now, if astrology isn't true, and if astrological compatibility isn't true, then that doesn't matter. But if it is true, and I'm showing you that it is, then it matters. And when something matters and you can make a difference, then you should. As far as Taylor Swift is concerned, she's got an inverse problem. The inverse problem is she's too famous. And so effectively she has to meet people as famous as her. And in the case of Travis Kelce, she has probably met someone like that. Although I don't see that their relationship synastry is particularly spectacular. That might not matter. Might not matter because synastry, we're looking at a narrow part of synastry, and that is the part that gets people together and that makes them feel a particular way about each other. And that couple has that. They have the Mars-Venus conjunction that make them feel very, very attuned to each other, physically particularly. But you might not need all those other things going on, the progressed Sun, progressed Venus, trine or opposition or conjunction, because that is a way of bringing people together. And there may be other ways that are bringing people together too. And astrology may have much more nuanced information that we can't get to because we don't have the research capabilities of doing that. I've told you before, I've mentioned before, that astrology hasn't been funded. It therefore hasn't been explored. So outcomes like the ones that I'm getting for Sun, Venus and Mars haven't been seen before. It may be that there is something to do with Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Mercury, the Moon, the descendant, something else that we have to dig to find. And if no one's funding this research and no one's been doing this research for 360 years, no one's going to have been digging anywhere. Now, there's a lot of well-meaning astrologers who do their own research. I've mentioned that this is called time-testing research, where they do one case after another. That's not good enough for what we need to get to where we need to get to. AI might be able to help us in the future, but certainly what we can do for people is, what we can do for lesbian and gay people is that we can develop a way to help them find each other quicker than they're finding each other at the moment. So you've been watching 22nd Century Science. My name is Paul Westron. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and I'll see you next week for another edition. And don't forget, astrology isn't what you thought it was, is it? It's still in the game. Somebody's pulling your chain. About 22nd Century Science.